Thomas hadn't slept in 4 days caring for his dying daughter. When exhaustion finally won on the airplane, his head fell onto a stranger's shoulder. The billionaire could have pushed him away. Instead, what he did next would create a global movement that changed millions of lives forever. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The exhaustion hit Thomas like a freight train as he sank into the airplane seat. He hadn't slept properly in 4 days, working double shifts at the factory and then staying up all night in the hospital with his 5-year-old daughter Lucy, who had been battling pneumonia. Now, finally on his way home after her recovery, his body was demanding payment for all those sleepless hours. Thomas rubbed his eyes and tried to focus on staying awake. The last thing he wanted was to embarrass himself on this flight. He'd used his last savings to buy these plane tickets for Lucy's medical treatment in the specialized children's hospital 3 states away. The doctors there had saved her life, but now his wallet was completely empty. "Daddy, are you okay?" Lucy asked softly, her small hand touching his arm. She was still weak from her illness but insisted on sitting up to color in her activity book. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired," Thomas smiled, though his eyelids felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. Next to him sat a man in an expensive navy blue suit, typing rapidly on a platinum laptop. The man's watch alone probably cost more than Thomas made in a year. His briefcase was made of the finest leather, and his shoes were polished to perfection. Everything about him screamed wealth and success. The man was Alexander Cross, CEO of Cross Industries, one of the largest tech companies in the world. Worth over $3 billion, he was flying back from a board meeting where they just announced record profits. His mind was focused on tomorrow's investor presentation and the merger talks with a Japanese company. But Alexander noticed the tired father beside him. He'd observed how Thomas had carefully counted crumpled dollar bills to buy Lucy a small snack earlier, how his clothes were clean but clearly worn many times, and how he kept checking a hospital discharge paper in his pocket with worried eyes. Thomas fought against the drowsiness, but his body had reached its limit. His head began to nod forward, then sideways, and before he knew it, his exhausted mind surrendered to sleep. His head gently came to rest on Alexander's shoulder. For a moment Alexander froze. His first instinct was to wake the man up. He didn't like being touched by strangers and he had important work to finish. But something made him pause. Maybe it was the way the little girl looked up at him with worried eyes, or maybe it was the deep exhaustion he could see in the man's face even in sleep. Alexander looked down at Thomas and noticed something that made his heart skip a beat. Sticking out of Thomas's shirt pocket was a hospital bracelet, not his own, but one that read Lucy Martinez, age 5, pediatric ICU. Lucy noticed Alexander looking and whispered, "My daddy hasn't slept in 4 days. He stayed with me in the hospital the whole time. The doctor said I almost died, but daddy never left my side." Alexander's throat tightened. He thought of his own daughter, Emma, who was now 25 and running the family foundation. When she was 5, she'd gotten lost in a shopping mall for 20 minutes, and Alexander remembered the sheer terror he'd felt. He couldn't imagine watching his child fight for her life in a hospital. "Is your daddy okay?" Alexander asked quietly. Lucy nodded seriously. "He's the best daddy in the world. He sold his car so we could come to the special hospital. He said my health is more important than anything else." Alexander felt a strange emotion stirring in his chest. Here was a man who had sacrificed everything for his child's health, and now he was so exhausted he couldn't even stay awake on a plane. Meanwhile, Alexander had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. Instead of waking Thomas, Alexander carefully adjusted his position so the tired father would be more comfortable. He closed his laptop and decided his work could wait. For the next hour he sat perfectly still, letting Thomas sleep peacefully on his shoulder. During that time Alexander talked quietly with Lucy. She told him about her favorite books, her drawings, and how she wanted to be a doctor when she grew up, "So I can help other kids like the doctors helped me." "What does your daddy do for work?" Alexander asked. "He fixes machines in a big factory. He works really hard, but he says it's okay because it means we can have a home and food," Lucy explained innocently. "But now he's worried because he missed so many days at work when I was sick. He thinks his boss might be angry." Alexander's heart sank. Not only had this man spent all his money on his daughter's treatment, but he'd also put his job at risk by taking time off. The injustice of it bothered Alexander more than he expected. As the plane began to descend, Thomas slowly woke up. It took him a moment to realize where he was and what had happened. When he saw that his head had been resting on the stranger's shoulder, his face turned bright red with embarrassment. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," Thomas stammered, sitting up quickly. I didn't mean to. I haven't slept in days and… Please don't apologize, Alexander said gently. You look like you needed the rest. Lucy told me you've been taking care of her in the hospital. Thomas looked surprised that this well-dressed stranger knew his daughter's name. Yes, she had pneumonia. It was touch and go for a while, but she's better now, thank God. That must have been terrifying, Alexander said. The worst experience of my life, Thomas admitted. But the doctors were amazing. I would have paid anything, done anything to save her. And you did, Alexander observed. Lucy told me you sold your car for the treatment. Thomas looked embarrassed again. She talks too much sometimes. I don't want charity or pity. I do what any father would do. Alexander smiled. Not every father would. You should be proud of yourself. As they prepared to land, Alexander made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Thomas, he said, pulling out a business card. I have a proposition for you. Thomas looked at the card and his eyes widened. Cross Industries was one of the biggest companies in the country. Everyone had heard of Alexander Cross. You're? Thomas began. Yes. And I'd like to offer you a job. Thomas stared at him in shock. I don't understand. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you're a devoted father who would sacrifice everything for his child. I know you're responsible and hardworking. Those are the qualities I value most in an employee. But I just fix machines. I don't have any special skills or education. We have a manufacturing division that makes medical equipment. We need someone to oversee quality control, someone who understands that the machines we build could save someone's life like the machines that saved Lucy's life. I can't think of anyone more motivated to do that job perfectly than you. Thomas felt tears forming in his eyes. Why would you do this for a stranger? Alexander was quiet for a moment. 20 years ago, I was flying home after my company almost went bankrupt. I was exhausted, devastated, and had lost almost everything. A stranger on that plane, an old man, let me cry on his shoulder and then offered me advice that saved my business. He told me that success isn't just about making money, it's about lifting others up when you have the power to do so. He looked at Lucy, who was listening with wide eyes. Today I have the power to lift someone up. And Lucy reminds me so much of my own daughter at that age. Thomas was speechless. Alexander continued, the job pays $80,000 a year, full health insurance, and there's a company housing program for employees with children. Lucy would have access to the best healthcare in the country. $80,000? Thomas whispered. He currently made $22,000 a year at the factory. Plus, we have an excellent education assistance program. If Lucy really wants to become a doctor someday, we can help make that happen. Lucy clapped her hands excitedly. Daddy, can we say yes? Please? Thomas looked at his daughter, then at Alexander, then back at the business card in his trembling hands. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. Take my personal number and call me tomorrow. That night, in their small apartment, Thomas sat at his kitchen table staring at Alexander's business card. Lucy was fast asleep, finally healthy and safe in her own bed. He thought about the medical bills he still owed, the risk of losing his current job, and the opportunity that seemed too good to be true. His phone rang. It was his supervisor from the factory. Thomas, I'm sorry, but we had to let you go. Too many missed days and the company can't afford to keep unreliable workers. Thomas's heart sank, but then he looked at the business card again. Maybe this was a sign. The next morning he called Alexander. Mr. Cross, this is Thomas Martinez. About your offer. I was hoping you'd call. Are you interested? Yes, sir. More than interested. But I have to ask, why me? You could hire anyone. Alexander paused. Can I tell you something, Thomas? Yesterday was one of the most important days of my career. I had a major presentation, crucial meetings, deals worth millions of dollars. But the hour I spent letting you sleep on my shoulder while talking to your daughter was the best hour I've had in years. I don't understand. I've been so focused on building an empire that I forgot why I started building it in the first place. It was supposed to be about making a difference, about helping people. You reminded me of that. 3 months later, Thomas walked into his office at Cross Industries. He still couldn't believe this was his life now. His official title was Director of Quality Assurance for Medical Equipment Manufacturing, and he took the responsibility seriously. Every machine they built could save someone's life, just like the machines that had saved Lucy. Lucy was thriving in her new school, which had an excellent science program. She'd already announced that she was going to invent new machines to help sick children when she became a doctor. But the biggest surprise came 6 months after Thomas started working at Cross Industries. Alexander called him into his office one afternoon. "Thomas, I have something to tell you. Do you remember that old man I mentioned? The one who helped me on the plane 20 years ago?" "Yes, sir. I've been trying to find him for years to thank him properly. I finally tracked him down last week." Alexander handed Thomas a photograph. It showed a younger Alexander sitting on a plane next to an older Hispanic man with kind eyes. Thomas stared at the photo, his mouth dropping open. That's my father." "Your father?" "Roberto Martinez. He died 10 years ago, but he used to travel a lot for his job. He was always helping people," he said. Thomas's voice broke. "He said that kindness was the only thing worth leaving behind in this world." Alexander sat back in his chair, stunned. "Your father saved my company. And now somehow you've saved my soul." They sat in amazed silence for a moment, both realizing that this connection was far more than coincidence. "There's something else," Alexander said. "I've been thinking about starting a foundation, something to help families facing medical crises. I'd like you to help me run it." "Me? But I don't know anything about running a foundation. You know what it's like to need help. That's more valuable than any business degree." 6 months later, the Martinez Cross Foundation held its first fundraising gala. The foundation provided financial assistance to families with children in medical crisis, ensuring that no parent would have to choose between their child's health and financial survival. Thomas stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd of donors and supporters. Lucy sat in the front row, healthy and beaming with pride. "A year ago, I was a single father working in a factory, scared that I might lose my daughter and my job," Thomas began. "Today I'm here because a stranger showed me kindness on an airplane. But more than that, I'm here because that stranger taught me that success isn't about what you achieve for yourself. It's about what you can do for others." He looked at Alexander, who was sitting beside Lucy. "Some people might say this story is about luck or coincidence. But I believe it's about something more powerful, the idea that when we help each other, we create miracles." The foundation grew rapidly. Within 2 years, they had helped over 1,000 families and had established partnerships with hospitals across the country. Lucy, now 7, had started a children's advisory board, helping the foundation understand what kids really needed during medical treatments. But perhaps the most beautiful part of the story happened on the second anniversary of that airplane encounter. Alexander was flying to another business meeting when he noticed a young mother sitting across the aisle, clearly distressed and exhausted. Her toddler was crying, and she was trying to comfort him while juggling medical papers in a hospital bag. Without hesitation, Alexander approached her. "Excuse me, is everything okay? Can I help with anything?" The woman looked up with tears in her eyes. "My son just had surgery and we're trying to get home, but he's in pain and I don't know what to do." Alexander sat down beside her. "My name is Alexander. Tell me what's wrong." As the woman shared her story, about her son's heart surgery, the medical bills she couldn't afford, the job she'd lost taking care of him, Alexander listened with a familiar feeling in his heart. When the plane landed, he handed her a business card for the Martinez Cross Foundation. "Call this number tomorrow. Tell them Alexander sent you. They'll help with everything, the medical bills, temporary housing, whatever you need." The woman stared at the card in disbelief. "Why would you help a stranger?" Alexander smiled, remembering Thomas's father's words about kindness being the only thing worth leaving behind. "Because someone once helped me when I needed it most. And now it's my turn to help you." Years later, Lucy did become a doctor, specializing in pediatric cardiology. On her first day of residency, she hung a photo in her new office, a picture of her father sleeping peacefully on Alexander's shoulder on that airplane so many years ago. Below the photo, she had written, "Sometimes angels wear business suits, and sometimes miracles happen at 30,000 feet. But the most important thing to remember is that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind. Always be kind." The transformation in both Thomas and Alexander's lives had been remarkable, but perhaps the most incredible changes happened in the people around them. Emma Cross, Alexander's daughter, had been initially skeptical when her father told her about his encounter with Thomas. She worried that her father was being taken advantage of by someone who might be pretending to need help. "Dad, you're a billionaire," she had said during one of their weekly dinners. "People will say anything to get money from you. How do you know this guy is legitimate?" But when Emma met Thomas and Lucy at the foundation's first board meeting, her skepticism melted away instantly. She watched as Thomas carefully reviewed every expense report, questioning costs and suggesting ways to help more families with the same budget. She saw Lucy, then 6 years old, drawing pictures for hospitalized children and asking thoughtful questions about how to make hospitals less scary for kids. "I was wrong about you," Emma told Thomas after that meeting. "You're not trying to take advantage of my father. You're trying to multiply his kindness." Emma became one of the Foundation's most passionate advocates, using her social media influence to raise awareness about families in medical crisis. Her posts about the Foundation regularly went viral, bringing in donations from people all over the world who were inspired by the story of kindness that had started on an airplane. Meanwhile, Thomas discovered talents he never knew he possessed. His natural empathy and understanding of struggle made him an exceptional leader for the Foundation. He had an intuitive ability to connect with families in crisis, knowing exactly what they needed to hear and how to help them navigate the overwhelming world of medical emergencies. One particularly memorable case involved a teenage boy named Marcus whose single mother was struggling to afford his cancer treatments. When Thomas met with the family, he didn't just offer financial assistance. He shared his own story, showing Marcus and his mother that they weren't alone in their fear and desperation. "I remember sitting in a hospital room watching my daughter fight for her life, feeling completely helpless," Thomas told them. "I thought I was the only father in the world who felt like such a failure. But I learned that love isn't about having all the answers or all the money. It's about showing up every single day and fighting alongside your child." Marcus's mother broke down crying, not from sadness but from relief. "I thought I was weak for being scared," she whispered. "You're not weak," Thomas assured her. "You're human. And being human means feeling scared sometimes. But it also means being capable of incredible love and strength." The Foundation helped Marcus's family with medical bills, transportation to treatments, and even arranged for Marcus to continue his education through a special program for hospitalized students. But more importantly, Thomas became a mentor to Marcus, visiting him regularly and helping him process the emotional challenges of fighting cancer as a teenager. Marcus beat his cancer and went on to become a social worker, specializing in helping families navigate medical crises. "Thomas taught me that surviving isn't just about beating the disease," Marcus later said. "It's about keeping your heart open to love and hope, even when everything seems impossible." Alexander, meanwhile, found that his business practices had fundamentally changed after meeting Thomas. He began implementing family-friendly policies across industries that were revolutionary for a major corporation. Employees received paid leave for family medical emergencies, comprehensive health insurance that covered even the rarest conditions, and access to counseling services for families dealing with health crises. "My employees aren't just workers," Alexander explained to skeptical board members. "They're people with families, with fears, with dreams. When we support them as whole human beings, they don't just work better, they innovate, they care, they build something meaningful together." The policy changes initially faced resistance from shareholders concerned about costs, but the results spoke for themselves. Employee satisfaction soared, productivity increased by 30%, and cross-industries began attracting the most talented workers in the industry. Other companies started copying their family-friendly policies, creating a ripple effect throughout the business world. But perhaps the most touching development was the relationship that grew between Alexander and Lucy. Having missed many moments with his own daughter while building his empire, Alexander found himself treasuring every interaction with Lucy. He attended her school plays, helped with science projects, and became the grandfather figure she'd never had. Lucy, in turn, challenged Alexander in ways no board member or business partner ever had. During one Foundation meeting, when Alexander suggested they focus on helping families in wealthy suburbs because it would be easier to raise funds there, 7-year-old Lucy raised her hand. "Mr. Alexander," she said seriously, "don't poor kids get sick too? And don't they need help more because they have less money?" The room fell silent. Alexander looked at this child who had cut straight to the heart of a complex issue with the clarity that only innocence can provide. "You're absolutely right, Lucy," he said, smiling. "Sometimes the most important questions come from the smallest people." The Foundation changed its focus that day, prioritizing families in the greatest need regardless of their location or background. It was a decision that would help thousands of families who might otherwise have been overlooked. As the years passed, the ripple effects of that airplane encounter continued to spread in unexpected ways. Dr. Sarah Chin, the pediatrician who had treated Lucy during her pneumonia, was so inspired by Thomas's dedication that she started a program training hospital staff to better support families during medical crises. "I realized that we were treating the disease but ignoring the family," Dr. Chin explained. "Thomas showed me that healing happens in the heart as much as in the body." The program, called Family First, became a model for hospitals nationwide. It focused on training medical staff to communicate with compassion, to understand the financial pressures families face, and to connect families with resources and support systems. One of the most remarkable stories to emerge from the Foundation's work involved a family from Thomas's old neighborhood. Maria Santos was a single mother whose infant son had been born with a rare heart condition requiring multiple surgeries. She had heard about the Martinez Cross Foundation through a friend and applied for assistance, not knowing any connection to Thomas. When Thomas reviewed her application and saw the address, he realized she lived just 3 blocks from his old apartment. He decided to visit her personally, bringing Lucy along, who was now 9 years old and actively involved in the Foundation's work. "Mrs. Santos," Thomas said when they met, "I used to live on Elm Street just down from here. I know how hard it is to struggle in this neighborhood while trying to take care of a sick child." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "You understand?" she whispered. "My friends try to help, but they don't really understand what it's like to watch your baby suffer and know you can't afford to give them everything they need." "I understand completely," Thomas said. "And I want you to know that you're not alone anymore." The foundation not only covered baby Santos's medical expenses but also helped Maria complete her nursing degree through their education assistance program. She eventually became a pediatric nurse at the same hospital where her son had been treated, dedicating her career to helping other families in crisis. "Thomas didn't just save my son's life," Maria said years later. "He saved my whole family's future." Lucy, watching these interactions, was developing a wisdom and compassion far beyond her years. At age 10, she asked Alexander a question that would shape the next phase of the Foundation's work. "Uncle Alexander," she said one day, she had started calling him uncle much to his delight, "what happens to the kids whose parents can't take care of them when they get sick? Like, what if they don't have a daddy like mine?" The question led to the Foundation's most ambitious project yet, the creation of family support houses near major children's hospitals. These houses provided free accommodation for families traveling for medical care, but more importantly, they created a community of support where families could help each other through the darkest times. The first house opened 3 years later with a plaque by the front door that read, "In memory of Roberto Martinez, who taught us that kindness is the only thing worth leaving behind, and in honor of all the families who find strength in each other." Thomas stood with Alexander and Lucy at the opening ceremony, watching as the first families moved into the house. A young father from rural Texas was carrying his toddler daughter, who was receiving treatment for leukemia. An elderly grandmother from Mexico was holding the hand of her grandson, who needed a heart transplant. A teenage mother was rocking her premature baby, born with complications that required months of specialized care. "Dad," Lucy said, slipping her hand into Thomas's, "do you think Grandpa Roberto can see this?" Thomas squeezed her hand. "I think he can see all of it, sweetheart. And I think he's proud." The support houses became a revolutionary model for family-centered medical care. Other organizations began replicating the concept, creating a nationwide network of places where families could find not just shelter, but community, understanding, and hope. But the most powerful testament to the impact of Thomas and Alexander's story came on the 10th anniversary of their airplane encounter. The Foundation organized a reunion of all the families they had helped over the years. More than 500 people gathered in the ballroom of a downtown hotel. Parents, children, grandparents, siblings, and medical professionals whose lives had been touched by the kindness that began with a tired father falling asleep on a stranger's shoulder. Marcus, the teenage cancer survivor who was now a social worker, served as the master of ceremonies. Dr. Chin spoke about the changes in hospital culture inspired by the Foundation's work. Emma Cross announced that Cross Industries was establishing similar foundations in 12 other countries, spreading the model of compassionate business practices globally. But the most moving moment came when Lucy, now 15 and preparing to start college early due to her exceptional academic achievements, took the stage. 10 years ago, my dad fell asleep on a stranger's shoulder," she began, her voice clear and strong. "He was embarrassed when he woke up, but that stranger, Uncle Alexander, saw something in my dad that changed both their lives forever." She paused, looking out at the crowd of faces that represented thousands of stories of struggle, hope, healing, and love. "People ask me all the time what the most important thing I learned from this experience is. And I think it's this: we are all just strangers until someone decides to care. Every person in this room was once a stranger to someone else in this room. But caring, real, genuine caring, turns strangers into family." Lucy's words resonated through the ballroom and beyond. Video of her speech went viral on social media, viewed by millions of people around the world. The hashtag strangers to family began trending, with people sharing stories of unexpected kindness and the ways small acts of compassion had changed their lives. One particularly powerful response came from a teacher in Japan who had seen the video. She wrote, "I was having the worst day of my teaching career, feeling like I wasn't making any difference in my students' lives. Then I watched Lucy's speech and realized that every child in my classroom is someone's Lucy, someone's precious miracle. I went to school the next day with a completely different heart." Another response came from a businessman in Germany. "I was about to fire an employee for taking too much time off to care for his sick mother. After seeing this story, I realized I had a choice. I could be someone who makes life harder for people in crisis, or I could be someone who makes it easier. I chose easier." A single mother from Brazil shared, "My daughter has been battling leukemia for 2 years. I saw Lucy's speech and applied to the Martinez Cross Foundation. Not only did they help with medical expenses, but they connected us with other families going through the same thing. For the first time in years, I don't feel alone." The impact continued to multiply, reaching far beyond what Thomas and Alexander could have ever imagined when they first met on that airplane. Schools began teaching empathy programs based on the foundation's principles. Businesses started implementing kindness policies that prioritized employee well-being. Hospitals adopted family-centered care models that recognized the importance of emotional support alongside medical treatment. The story even reached the halls of government. Senator Patricia Williams, herself a cancer survivor, introduced legislation called the Family Medical Support Act, which would provide federal funding for programs similar to the Martinez Cross Foundation. During her speech on the Senate floor, she held up a photo of Thomas sleeping on Alexander's shoulder. "This image represents something we've forgotten in our society," she said. "The power of human connection. The importance of caring for our neighbors. The understanding that we are all just one medical crisis away from needing someone else's kindness." The bill passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, leading to the creation of family support programs in hospitals across the nation. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came 5 years later, when Thomas received an unexpected phone call. "Is this Thomas Martinez?" the voice asked. "Yes, this is Thomas. Mr. Martinez, this is Dr. Jennifer Walsh from the International Foundation for Medical Family Support. I'm calling to inform you that you and Alexander Cross have been selected as this year's recipients of the Roberto Martinez Humanitarian Award." Thomas nearly dropped the phone. "I'm sorry, did you say the Roberto Martinez Award?" "Yes, sir." The award was established by a consortium of international medical organizations to honor individuals who demonstrate extraordinary compassion in supporting families during medical crises. "It was named after your father, based on the story Alexander Cross shared about how your father's kindness changed his life and subsequently the lives of thousands of others." Thomas sat down heavily, overwhelmed by the realization that his father's simple act of kindness on an airplane decades ago had not only changed Alexander's life but had now become a symbol of hope recognized around the world. The award ceremony was held at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Representatives from medical organizations across 6 continents gathered to honor the work of the Martinez Cross Foundation and to celebrate the ripple effect of kindness that had spread from a single airplane encounter. Lucy, now 18 and a freshman at Harvard studying pre-med, introduced her father and Alexander at the ceremony. 15 years ago, my dad was a tired factory worker who fell asleep on a stranger's shoulder," she began. "Today he's helping to reshape how the world thinks about medical care and family support. But the most important thing he taught me isn't about running a foundation or helping families in crisis. He taught me that every person we meet has a story and every story matters." She paused, looking out at the international audience. "My grandfather Roberto used to say that kindness is the only thing worth leaving behind in this world. Today that kindness has traveled from a plane seat to this hall at the United Nations. It has crossed oceans and language barriers. It has built hospitals and funded research and saved countless families from financial ruin." Thomas stood to accept the award, holding the crystal sculpture that bore his father's name. As he looked out at the audience, he saw faces from around the world, doctors and nurses, foundation workers and government officials, families who had been helped and volunteers who had given their time to help others. "My father would be amazed to know that his simple act of kindness has led to this moment," Thomas said. "But I think he would be even more amazed to know that the kindness didn't stop with Alexander and me. It has multiplied into something he could never have imagined." He held up the award. "This doesn't belong to me or to Alexander. It belongs to every person who has chosen kindness over indifference, who has seen a stranger in need and decided to help, who has understood that we are all connected by our shared humanity." Alexander joined Thomas at the podium. 15 years ago, I thought success was measured by profit margins and stock prices. A tired father sleeping on my shoulder taught me that real success is measured by the lives we touch and the hope we create. Today, the Martinez Cross Foundation operates in 43 countries, has helped over 50,000 families, and has inspired similar organizations around the world. He looked at Thomas with tears in his eyes. But the most important thing it did was teach me how to be human again. After the ceremony, as they walked through the halls of the United Nations, Lucy linked arms with both Thomas and Alexander. "Dad, Uncle Alexander," she said, "I have something to tell you. I've been accepted to medical school, and I've decided to specialize in pediatric oncology." Thomas felt his heart swell with pride. "Sweetheart, that's wonderful. But are you sure? It's going to be incredibly difficult." "I'm sure," Lucy said firmly. "I want to be there for families the way you were there for me. I want to be the doctor who not only treats the disease but who understands what families are going through." She smiled at both men. "And I want to make sure that every sick child has someone who fights for them the way my dad fought for me." As they walked out into the New York evening, Thomas reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. From a desperate single father with $5 in his pocket to an internationally recognized humanitarian, the transformation seemed impossible. But he knew it had all started with the simplest thing in the world: one person choosing to be kind to another. Years later, when Lucy had become Dr. Martinez and was running her own clinic for underserved children, she would tell her young patients a story about a tired daddy who fell asleep on a kind stranger's shoulder on an airplane. She would tell them about the magic that happens when people choose to care for each other, and how small acts of kindness can grow into movements that change the world. And in her office, beside her medical degree and awards for excellence in pediatric care, hung a simple photograph, a picture of her father sleeping peacefully on Alexander's shoulder, with a little girl coloring in the seat beside them. Below the photo, she had written her grandfather's words, "Kindness is the only thing worth leaving behind in this world." The story of Thomas and Alexander had become legend, but it was also living proof that ordinary people can create extraordinary change simply by choosing to see the humanity in others. Their foundation continued to grow, their model was replicated around the world, and their message spread far beyond the medical community. But perhaps the most beautiful part of their legacy was the countless untold stories of kindness it inspired. Moments of compassion between strangers, acts of generosity that would never make headlines, and simple human connections that reminded people that we are all part of the same human family. Because in the end, that's what Roberto Martinez had understood so many years ago when he let a young businessman cry on his shoulder. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply be present for another person's pain and offer them the gift of your kindness. Everything else, the foundations, the awards, the international recognition, was just kindness multiplied. And somewhere in heaven, Roberto Martinez was smiling, knowing that the seed of compassion he had planted in Alexander's heart had grown into a forest of hope that would continue to flourish for generations to come. The man who had once fallen asleep on a billionaire's shoulder had become living proof that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply rest in someone else's kindness, and then spend the rest of your life teaching others to do the same. The young mother Alexander had helped on his later flight eventually became a nurse, inspired by the kindness she'd received. Her son grew up to become an engineer, designing better medical equipment. The cycle of kindness continued to spread, touching lives in ways that Thomas and Alexander would never fully know. Because that's how real miracles work. They don't just change one person's life, they create ripples that spread outward, touching heart after heart, generation after generation. And somewhere in heaven, Roberto Martinez was smiling, knowing that the kindness he had planted in a young businessman's heart had grown into something beautiful beyond his wildest dreams. The man who had once fallen asleep on a billionaire's shoulder had become living proof that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply rest in someone else's kindness, and then pass that kindness forward to everyone you meet. Because in the end, the greatest wealth isn't measured in dollars or possessions. It's measured in the lives you touch, the hope you restore, and the love you share with a world that desperately needs both miracles and the people brave enough to create them.